So it really is a pleasure for me to welcome you here today for the 2045 interview. And essentially for folks listening to the 2045 interview for the first time is creating a vision for the year 2045, exploring means of getting there. And part of the process is to interview people that are thinking about what the world might be in 2045 or after, and especially so given the current huge global challenges we face, climate and pandemic, just to name two of them. So we all know that radical change is absolutely necessary. And so it's a pleasure to welcome Shariff today, who's been working in this area for a long, long time. And so it was very easy for me today, when I knew I was going to be conducting this interview, to go get this wonderful book that's been on the shelf with the kind of my sacred collection, a book that Shariff wrote in 1999 called Creating a World That Works for All. And one of the profound things I remember about reading that book was Shariff's wise observation that everybody thinks they have the answer. He said, no, we all have a piece of the answer. And I think that is more evident today than ever. And in some ways that is so consistent with the vision of 2045, trying to coordinate and get people working in this area to collaborate with each other, which is something that hasn't been done as much as it might be. Just a little bit about Shariff. I know that he came through a very challenging and difficult childhood in Camden, New Jersey, where I happened to go to law school, so I understand what Camden is like. And the short story, it was a challenging upbringing, and Shariff somehow was able to move through that period of time. Went to law school in Boston, practiced law for a number of years as an activist lawyer, and then decided that he might do a lot more as a writer, as an activist. I know that he was involved in the peacekeeping movement in Sri Lanka when they had their civil war down there, and many other causes along the way. I'm most intrigued by one of his latest book called The Chronicles of the Upheavals, where he posits a vision for a positive future, and we'll get into that.
For the past couple of months, I've been fairly uneasy about some things. This catalyzed in some work that I'm doing with regard to starting an awakening center. And we're going to be talking about awakening centers when we talk about the Chronicles of the Upheavals. But the idea is a place that actually models how human beings can and should live, work, play, pray together in a 21st century context. So someone in Kansas offered some land, and we said, okay, let's go. And as soon as we did that, we ran right into the brick wall of all of the beliefs and assumptions of what we mean when we talk about anything, our consciousness. Taking an unreformed consciousness into a transformed 21st century simply doesn't work. So for the past month or two, I've kind of been in a bit of a tailspin, like, how are we going to get past, how do we get past ourselves? Does that make any sense? That how do you actually get past the stumbling block? And right now I'm looking for a really cool quote I came across the other day. And this is a quote by someone who appears to be anonymous or unknown. And they really should own this, because the more I say it, the more it becomes something coming out of my mouth. And the quote was, "The most crucial step towards solving a problem is to be able to recognize yourself as part of the problem." Now, we're so used to pointing our finger over there, over there, over there. Those guys over there need to change their consciousness. That's what most of us mean when we talk about consciousness change. Very, very few of us want to actually own that we are an integral part of the problem. Or well, I haven't bought my Prius yet, or I haven't changed all my light bulbs yet, but not recognizing that, no, we're talking about an integral part of all of the problems. Václav Havel talked about the line between the victim and the victimizer running through each one of our hearts. The victimizer part is the part that we don't pay any attention to. I've been to Auschwitz twice, once on a personal pilgrimage and once at the invitation of a bunch of people to talk about, specifically about Auschwitz and the concept of inclusivity. And when I was on my personal pilgrimage, I was sitting literally inside the bombed out crematorium where they were burning the bodies. And instead of sitting there as the victim, I sat there as the German designers who sat down with pencil and paper and designed a death factory and realized, oh, we could have made this much more efficient. You know, we could have had the railroad cars come right into the crematorium. You know, why bother having people walking all around? It's like, just pull them in, gas them, kill them, burn them, and take the ashes out to the farms. To know that that energy is inside of me, not inside of those people over there. I recognize that, yes, we could move into fascism. But if we do, it will be with my energy also. Therefore, I have to look for a very substantial and a very powerful fix to all the stuff that I'm looking at. So I'm getting to the past 2 weeks now. So I've been kind of in this tailspin for about the past month, and then through circumstances I won't bother boring you with, I realized that there's another book that I've been meaning to write for at least 50 years. And it's time to write it. And this is a book on power. And the reason I say 50 years, when I first went to college, Clark University in Worcester, Massachusetts, I wanted to take a course on power. I was very early into the Black Power movement. Very early, I think I read Stokely Carmichael's Black Power. I think the ink was still wet on it when I got my copy of it. And I was in a founding member of the Black Panthers in Philadelphia, and we were constantly talking about power to the people. And I was always uneasy with that slogan because I didn't know what it meant. So, okay, I'm going to go to college and I'm going to take a course on power. That's what I went to college for. And guess what? They don't offer any, you know? And so I said, okay, well, politics is power. So let me take a course on political science. If you've ever had a course on political science, you know, there ain't no power in the room at all. That can even put the lights out. I said, okay, next semester, economics, money is power. So I took a course in economics, ain't none there. And as I kind of stumbled through all the offerings of the university, I realized they don't offer power. our society runs on it, but we don't know what it is. We're talking about the creation of a new society, perhaps even a new civilization. And we don't have a firm grip on what we're creating. We're like the young boys in Lord of the Flies, where as soon as we get the opportunity, we will recreate the mess that we've got right now with new characters and expecting a new result. And guess what? There won't be one.
Tell us why specifically you think that what you just said is true. Slash, what's the answer for creating a world that's different?
Right. Oh, the way to, okay, so that one's easy. Okay. To create a world that's different, you get a bunch of guys with a bunch of guns, you start shooting a whole bunch of people, and then you take over Kabul, and then you got a world that's different, you know. But you've also got a world that functions exactly the same for the people that you just kicked out of power. The idea behind creating a world that works for all. Okay, it's interesting that we went straight to my cutting edge stuff here, because I'm still working on this. I definitely want a recording of this to find out what I said. Okay. So creating a world that works for all, as you said, the book has been out for what, 22 years. And when I sat down with my publisher, Steve Piersanti at Barrett Kohler, Steve actually edited the book. And when we were getting toward the finish line, they asked some fairly standard questions, and one of them is, "What do you think the trajectory of this book is? Like, how big is this book?" And I had been thinking about this for a while, and like working through my ego stuff around thinking about it for a while. And I said that creating a world that works for all. What's the name of the book? 11 years on a New York Times bestseller list. Oh, The Road Less Traveled. I said, this could be bigger than The Road Less Traveled. Taking nothing away from The Road Less Traveled, I think it was a pretty okay book. And needless to say, that didn't work. That prediction didn't happen. And I think the reason that it didn't happen is that creating a world that works for all is not the same thing as saying, I want the world to be a better place. I go out here on this street and I pick up one cigarette butt and put it in the trash can, and I've made the world a better place. I can go back and do whatever the hell I feel like doing now. Creating a world that works for all means that I have to give up my position and look at the position of I take 20 or 30 different human beings from around the world. A fisherman in Sri Lanka, a seamstress in Bangladesh, somebody who drives a truck for Amazon in the US, etc. And then that's my human cohort. And then I've got to take 10 or 15,000 other beings from different species, saying, how does the world work for that bird right there? How does the world work for that tree right over there? My friend Joanna Macy created something that she called the Council of All Beings, where you sit in a room not as a human being. You get assigned an animal. You're sitting there as part of the fish nation. You're sitting there part of the winged nation, and so we have to learn how to do that. For a while in downtown Portland, I did a monthly series called Learning to Think and Act Like a Planet. And that's what we need to do, is learn how to think and then act. not as human beings, but as an entire planet. This is especially true since the metamorphosis we're going through is going to be so profound. Now, the really easy part is we don't have to do very much because Mother Earth herself is shifting the tables right under our feet. And if we are if what we're trying to do is hold the line, if what we're trying to do is get all the fire trucks in the world to line up to keep the forest fires away from us, we are fighting. That's just one battle we'll lose. Okay. If we're trying to keep every human being from getting COVID, that's another battle we are losing. By just defining the battle, we've lost it. Okay. And so we need to be asking, we don't have a common solution or common even set of solutions because we don't even see a common problem. Some of us see that the problem is the white power structure. Some of us see the problem as the patriarchy. Some of us see the problem as colonialism. Some of us see the problem as capitalism. Some of us see the solution as capitalism. We are all over the place. And I don't think any of those get anywhere near the central issues of this world is functioning according to our consciousness. And if we don't change the consciousness, it will just continue to run out. And when it runs out, it runs out and something else will take its place. Human beings may be involved with that, but at the rate we're going, we won't be. And that'll be okay too. The earth will go on. I think it was, what's his name? Lovelock, who was saying, you know, the next 100 years, the earth will look like it's got a really bad cold and it'll bounce back. Maybe without us, you know. And so our challenge is, oh, okay, I'm sorry. So my challenge, this is right, I'm right on I'm right at what I was working on last night, is this book on power, doing the outline for it, and then realizing that I'm talking about two books, because one is an analysis of power, and then power from the point of view of this is how we get to the butterfly. Okay, I'm awake now, and I've got a story that you may have actually heard of. This happened like maybe in the last 6 months or so. A woman in Uganda is having a baby. She goes to the hospital, does her yelling and screaming, and out pops a baby. And she's happy, her husband's happy. They bundle up their little bundle of joy and take, I don't remember whether him or her, but take the child home. A week later, she is experiencing extreme abdominal discomfort. And concerned, her husband takes her to the hospital. By the time she's there, she gets there, she's yelling and screaming. And they give her an x-ray and they find this tumorous mass in her stomach. And they're about to open her up for emergency surgery. And out pops another baby. She was one of the very rare women with 2 wombs. Her husband got her pregnant in both of her wombs. She had the 2 babies a week apart. And then when they hand her this tumor called the baby, it's like, oh, that's what all that yelling and screaming was about. Okay. So we are completely focused on the yelling, the screaming, and the pain, we're not asking the question, what is it that wants to be born now? What's the vision that makes all of this stuff not only necessary, but a prelude to the joy of a birth? For those of you who have been involved in a birth, I'm not sure you can name a messier process. I mean, there's gunk and there's junk and there's afterbirth and there's all this other stuff that you don't have any memory of because you're sitting there looking at this baby. We, especially through our media, are spending all of our time looking at the afterbirth. We don't even believe that there's a baby in there anywhere. What we have to do is discipline ourselves so that we're not doing that, so that we actually are paying attention to the baby that wants to be born. And I'm going to pause right there because I know this is supposed to be an interview, and I can go for a while. So yeah,
the pause is perfect. So
yeah.
so just to contextualize what it is you've said, all right? So you've talked a little bit about, you know, if we keep going the way we're going, we may not even be around anymore. As a species, Mother Earth will survive, no question about that, all right? And you just told us a wonderful story about the potential for a bundle of joy and a spark of a wonderful life that's possible. How might we as a species get to that place where that joy emerges for many, 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 many human beings? What's your possible vision for how we as a species can get through this and emerge on the other side as a functional species?
I'm writing down functional species because I think it's a strange sounding thing that's actually pretty accurate. What I've been talking about is something I'm calling relationism. Okay, we've had capitalism, we have communism, but how do we relate to all beings? And the first being we have to relate to is ourselves. We don't have a relationship with ourselves. The sheer fact that there is a suicide rate and that is steadily climbing means that we're out of relationship with ourselves. We're out of relationship with all other human beings. The primary industry of human beings on our planet is staying away from each other. The trillions and trillions of dollars we spend on militaries, the hundreds and thousands of dollars that each of us spends on our personal security. I mean, how many keys do you have on your key ring? All of these things are an integral part of us acting as though we are not a species. So the first thing that we're going to be doing is beginning the process of acting like we are actually connected with each other and that connection matters. The second piece is, how do we then connect with all other beings? Well, there are people on the planet who have been doing that. We just need to ask them, excuse us, you've been trying to tell us this for about 1 million years, for about the last 10,000 years, but how do you say we do that again? And I'm talking about the keepers. And this is something that is, I think, a really important part of creating a world that works for all, to recognize that there are 3 different kinds of consciousness on the planet. And this does away with all of the faulty ways of analyzing things. So this gets us beyond racism, beyond patriarchy, beyond sexism, beyond all of that stuff. They're keepers, they're breakers, and then they're menders. The keepers are the people that we call the indigenous people. These are people who have lived within the earth's tolerances for as long as they've been there. When we say that humanity could be destroyed, we're talking about our humanity, not theirs. If we go down the tubes, somebody would have to go to them and tell them, okay, because they wouldn't recognize it, because they are connected to the earth and connected to other beings, and will continue to live their life that way without our interference. The breakers are those who break the sacred hoop. The breakers are those who say, I don't live with the earth, I live on top of the earth. And I guess we could have a group we would call the eco breakers, in that they say they're working for the earth, but they still see humanity as superior to all other beings, and that gives us a responsibility to do X or Y or Z. So it's like, I'm going to save the earth with the same consciousness that broke it. Einstein said that doesn't work real well, and so we know not to do that. Third group is the menders, and the menders are those of us who recognize that we're part of the problem. I was raised as a breaker. I've got 2 breaker degrees. Okay, I'm certified. Okay, and I recognize that in order for the earth to survive, in order for me to survive, I have to let that go. And so for the last few decades, I've been working hard to let go of my breakerness and to embrace the values of the keepers. Okay, so now I will take another sip of tea.
As a person sharing, those breaker degrees with you, the question pops up in my mind. In my simplistic view, we've got 2 absolutely raging challenges right in front of us, the pandemic and the climate. And how is it that we as a human species, those of us who have been breakers and have lived in the breaker world, how is it that we can transform ourselves in a period of time such that we are able to break this cycle and step back into a life that's more congruent with other species on Earth, and in some ways create the world that is going to work for all / at least a whole lot more of us? What's a path that you see that's possible?
I am glad you brought up these 2 issues, because in order for us to solve a problem, we have to understand what is the problem. I have to say that I am not a COVID conspiracy theorist. COVID is something that's real. It exists in the world. You can catch it. It'll do something to you, etc. So I am vaccinated. In both of these issues, in the pandemic issue and then the climate issue, I think the problem is that we don't understand the problem. Some countries set out to manage COVID. You remember the phrase, flatten the curve.
Yeah.
Other countries set out to stop COVID. The countries that set out to stop COVID stopped it cold. The countries that set out to manage COVID, it's still raging. You know, what did Einstein say about doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result?
Insanity. Mhm.
Now, if I were Joe Biden, glad I'm not, I would have said on the day that I was elected, I would have said to my team, we're sending 12 people to Singapore, to New Zealand, to Hong Kong, and we're going to find out how they stopped COVID. And then we're just going to do what they're doing. Because once you say that, you stop it. Until you say that, until you say, those people over there know more than I know myself. Until you get over, white coat syndrome, lab coat syndrome, and stop saying, because we're spending the most money, we have to know the most about this situation. You will never, ever see the problem, and you'll never, ever see the solution. Global climate change, people are getting upset about it because what it means is that not that, polar bears are dying or forests are dying, it's that my life is going to be upset. What I want is the status quo, and I'm going to do anything I can do to keep the status quo. And my response to that is, to hell with your status quo, because that is the thing that's been destroying the earth, not just changing the climate, it's changing all of our environments. We've all seen all of the hockey sticks of how we can't do this anymore. William Catton did research on how many people the earth will support. At the level of the keepers, it'll support billions and billions and billions of people. You actually can't even calculate the number. At the level of the average American, the people on the call right now, the earth won't support 200 million people. It won't even support all Americans. Now, that just simply means, I want to be one of the people it supports. Screw all those people back there. Screw the entire earth. I don't want to give up my stuff. We know how to live on a planet that's hot. There are people who have been doing that for hundreds of thousands of years. We know how to live on a planet that's cold. There are people who have been doing that for hundreds of thousands of years. No one's been living the way we've been living. So whether the climate change means that we get hot, then we start wearing thubes and burqas and turbans, and we get with the program. If the planet is getting cold, we start learning how to build igloos, and we start wearing walrus skin coats, and we get with the program. It's not about what we want. It's about what the earth wants. And I got more to say about that, but I'm gonna stop right there.
So what needs to happen, okay, for more of us, I won't say survive, but for more of us to potentially thrive on this planet? What's your vision? What needs to happen? I thought where you were going to go before, and maybe I'll ask this directly, what change of consciousness, what change of awareness, what change of mindset do you think needs to happen?
I went to the Himalayas about 6 or 7 years, about 7 or 8 years ago now. I wound up in the proverbial cave at the 15,000 foot level. And if you've ever been at 15,000 feet, there's not an awful lot of oxygen up there. Okay, I spent most of my time breathing, really consciously breathing. I wound up in this former abandoned temple that's stuck in the side of the mountain. It was so old, it was really unclear whose temple it was. It could have been a Buddhist temple, but it could have been a Bon temple also that predated Buddhism. And I meditated there for a couple of days on a particular question. And my question was, what's the thing that's going to make the change? Well, like I've been working on this for, half a century. What is actually going to make the change? And I thought that I was going to receive, the magic pen, and we'd be able to write a whole new book or whatever. And very specifically, what powers did we have hundreds of years ago or thousands of years ago that allowed humanity to build something like the Great Pyramid, to allow humanity to build something like Göbekli Tepe? The answer was, there isn't a special technique. There isn't the magic pen. What there is a power that all human beings have. You automatically have it. However, the only way you can exercise it is by exercising it together. You have to blend your consciousness. We were raised thinking that I, sitting here in Portland, Oregon, I have my consciousness. Y'all sitting wherever you are right now, you have your consciousness. Mine isn't like yours. Yours isn't like mine. We may be able to beat air at each other to communicate, but that's about it. This revelation was, no, that's one way of doing things. The other way of doing things is to recognize that there is one consciousness, and each of us borrow from that consciousness. Each of us, as if somebody was walking down the street in front of my apartment right now, I'm using that person's brain cells. They're not using them. But, it's like they're walking down with a sign saying "this space for rent," So I can use the consciousness that's around me. There's another force, and breakers will never find that force because they're not looking for it. They've created the standard model, and that standard model works really, really well for them. So the hell with everything that leaks out of the standard model. That's the place where we start. So the mission of the Awakening Center is to start blending consciousness, to have us consciously conscious, to have us blending the consciousness in such a way that it becomes purposeful and we get to do work with it. And this is something that when we think about Benjamin Franklin, we think about, signer of the Declaration of Independence, actually one of the few people that signed all three forming documents of the government, inventor, etc. But the one principal thing that Benjamin Franklin did that we don't really recognize him for was basically the creation of electricity. We knew about electricity for thousands of years. Anybody could look up in the sky and see lightning. Oh, the gods are fighting again, But he actually made it useful. He made electricity go from a parlor game where they had these cranks, they would generate electricity, and you go around the room shocking each other like, that's so fun. You do that by candlelight because nobody ever thought that electricity could be useful. And he developed the theories while almost barbecuing himself, the theories under which Edison, Tesla, everybody else owes the debt of gratitude to to Franklin. My goal is to make consciousness, to make this blended consciousness useful, so that when we get to that point, collective humanity can say to the carbon in the atmosphere, we're really sorry for putting you there. We're not going to put you there anymore. We would like for you to come down from the sky, and it will simply come down. It's actually the opposite of lifting the blocks up to the Great Pyramid. It's like taking things down. And it's not those who say that's impossible. It's not that it's not possible. It's simply, how do we do this?
What I heard you evoking was a level of what I'll call a Christ consciousness that a mass of people step into. The question I have is, so how might we attempt to make that happen, Shariff, or to manifest that on a big, broad level? Okay.
This is ripe. I mean, this is why I'm staying up at night. I mean, this is really, really ripe right now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have the I hope I don't have the ego barriers that say it has to come through me. It may be coming through someone else a lot clearer, in which case I get out my pom-poms and say, go team, go, and go that way, go with that person. You know, right now in Portland, there's something like between 10 and 15,000 people sleeping in tents on the streets, completely thrown away by society. Add to that another 10,000 of people who are couch surfing with friends. Add to that maybe another 10,000 of people. I mean, I've talked to so many people whose adult children are moving back home. And what you're seeing is a society that works for almost no one. If you take those people, the tired, the poor, the hungry, that are on our teeming shores of our streets right now. Okay, I want to stand up for a second. Okay, no tents out there right now, but and that's because I live right near the Lloyd Center, and they're keeping the fiction that there are no homeless people in Portland, so they clear our streets pretty regularly of tents. They move them all about 2 blocks that way. Okay, and we say to people, you can become part of a future, and that future looks like the butterfly. We're going someplace, and we can get over our caterpillar ways, and we can actually go someplace. The resources for that to happen exist right now in our society. You know, the people, you know, we look at what's his face, Bezos, and what's his face, the other guy with the face.
Elon Musk.
Well, no, not well, that one too.
Oh, Bezos,
but,
and yeah. Mm-hmm.
The space guys.
The rocket ship guys.
Yeah, right. And they did that for a particular reason. And that is, you can't spend $10 billion. You can't spend $50 billion. You can't spend $100 billion. It's not possible. I've done like kind of my internal Einstein to develop the theory of relativity did an imaginary ride on a light wave. Okay, so I've done my imaginary. Okay, I got $150 billion and I need to spend it. And I'm not, but the rules are you can't spend it on something that's simply going to make more money. You have to spend it on something you care about. And so you buy yourself the yacht, you get yourself the 3 or 4 or 50 houses. Jennifer Lopez has 30 multi-billion-dollar houses. She doesn't even get to visit them. And you do all that, and you've spent about $5 billion. And the rest of it just sits there. So you're looking at it and start creating these awakening villages, and start creating those villages in such a way that they become self-generating. And that's what the whole thing about Chronicles of the Upheavals is about. Lots and lots of people are living in intentional communities right now, and that's I think that's better than trying to live in this kind of a community. But most intentional communities become very self-absorbed. They are really focused inward. The Awakening Center is focused outward, and their primary goal is how do we double ourselves? How do we create 2 awakening centers? And then once we've done that, how do we create 4 awakening centers? And then once we've done that, how do we create 16 awakening centers? How do we keep this thing going until it becomes a real alternative for people? I can have a choice between living in this kind of a society, living in this sunset society, living in the terminal point of a toxic society, or I can live in the upswing. And I believe that there are lots and lots of people who would give up their privileges, give up the privileges of being in a toxic society in order for them to be a really integral part of a living fabric of society. And I write about that in Chronicles of the Upheavals. Like, what does it mean for me to live this way? What does it mean to live another way?
Thank you for that exposition. So just to summarize in my own mind with my own words what you've said, it's at some fundamental level a huge shift in consciousness. It's letting go of the thinking that so many people have been programmed by, and the resources are present. We don't have a resource challenge, we have a distribution challenge, and there's a way in which we can use what we have if we transform the inner space, as opposed to going to outer space.
I want to actually remind Kim of a conversation that we had back in, I guess that was in San Francisco with Tessa and a bunch of other folks up in the hotel suite, where we were talking about, okay, there are the Bezoses and what's the other guys?
Yeah, Richard Branson. Richard
Branson. So they've got, the billions and billions of dollars, but there's another level of multi-billionaires. The people who bought, who are working for Google, working for Apple in the beginning. They got a whole bunch of stock and got a little bit of pay, and the stock is worth billions of dollars now. And all they go to work every day. They haven't even bought a new car. They can buy a car company, and they're still driving a used car. And those people would want to do something with their wealth. And they know that giving it to a soup kitchen is doing absolutely nothing. That giving it to, kind of building housing for, it's like, that does nothing. What the resources are looking for is a new idea. And we are the ones that should be the holders of that new idea. I'm saying that specifically uh, I think there are a number of young people that have a great deal of arrogance around, oh, you are the people that created the problem. And they're walking around with exactly the same consciousness, but oh, it's all, all you people with the gray hair created the problem. It's like, yeah, and then it'll be your turn, you know. Um, if there's any problem to that's left. In terms of what Stewart said around Christ consciousness, I agree, but I do not use that terminology because it's loaded, and it's loaded with a particular way of approaching transcendence. I've let go of all of those ways, or I should say, I embrace all of them to the point that it becomes um, uh, it literally is one. All of our wisdom teachers, whether it's the Christ consciousness, the Buddha consciousness, the Lao Tzu consciousness, etc., all of them were pointing in exactly the same direction, and and just saying that could get me killed, and I won't even know who fired the shot because all of them could be pissed off at me. And so the challenge is, how do we take the consciousness without taking the baggage that's all that is associated with that consciousness, that says my way is the only way that can be where we can do this. My friend Matthew Fox, and he and I have been engaged in a series of conversations recently. There's also been sparking a lot of the stuff that we're talking about. He says that all of the world's religions are like wells that are all plugged into the same underground river. And all of the fundamentalists believe that their well is the only one that has water in it. Everybody else has poison. And so the challenge is, how do we embrace the entire river? And that's the function of how we work on blended consciousness. Now, we know how to blend consciousness. It's just that each group is trying to blend consciousness for their group as opposed to for the whole. If you have ever been in an ecstatic spiritual experience, and you feel the boundary of your consciousness start to both expand and leave you. If you've ever been to a really close basketball game during the finals, that you are having a shared consciousness experience. Is it possible for us to do that outside of our home team, outside of our home church, outside of our home species? Can we do that with other beings? And the answer for that is, of course, is yes. Now, the question is, how do you make that happen? One of the things that happened, I was supposed in that bad tsunami, the Christmas time tsunami, I think it was 2008, that hit lots of countries, including Sri Lanka. I was supposed to be in Sri Lanka at my getaway spot, and I would have been standing on the beach when it hit. Okay, I got appendicitis here in the United States, and my kids are saying, "Oh, it's too bad you got appendicitis." And then when we heard about the tsunami, it's like, "We're really happy you got appendicitis." And so one of the things that happened during the tsunami, right before the first wave hit, there are a number of elephants that are trained as basically bulldozers. Okay, they lift up trees, they haul stuff away, etc. And the mahouts are the people who train the elephants. And at night they chain the elephants, put a chain around them. And it's it's almost symbolic, because as soon as the right before the first wave hit, all of the elephants snapped their chains and started running up the hill. Mm. And the people, they had no idea what was going on. But they said something's going on, so they start running after the elephants. And as the humans and elephants are running up the hill, the elephants are picking people up and putting them on their backs. Now, that is the kind. Oh, and the elephants got up to a certain elevation on the hill and then just stopped. And everybody's like, what just happened? And then 15 minutes later, the first wave comes in, and they saw why the elephants had done that. Now, that kind of communication without words, that kind of messaging is available to us all the time, but not when I'm thinking about myself as an individual human being. When I recognize that I am an integral part of the whole, and I don't mean that like I can think that. I can think that all the time. When I recognize I'm an integral part of the whole, things will come up for all of us. I may be sitting here for a revelation, and one of you gets the revelation and tells the rest of it. Okay, well, that's my revelation too. Can I say one more thing, and then I'm going to really probably say another. I have had a number of journeys with the plant medicine called ayahuasca. I don't know if any of you have had that. I don't know if any of you want to share that on while the recording is going on here. Yeah, and for me, it's if you've ever had an ayahuasca experience, you know this is not a drug experience. This is not. This is something completely different. It is the world's first psychoactive drug. It is. I could keep talking about it, but I'll just give you one experience. Along with everything else, I only take journeys with people where there is a conductor, and that conductor has to be steeped in the traditions of the people he or she is conducting for. And so this is during I've done 5 journeys. I think this is during my 3rd journey. There are 30 people in the room. It's completely dark. And the conductor is singing and chanting in Shipibo, which is the language of the people in South America where the ayahuasca revealed itself. And we're all having different kinds of experiences. But it seems like halfway through, it's really hard to tell time. The healer starts singing a particular song in Shipibo. And all 30 of us start singing the same song in Shipibo. Now, at the time, there were 2 of me present in this body. And the 2 of us are having a fight. And the one that's talking to you right now was saying to the other one, shut up. You can't sing in Shipibo. You don't understand Shipibo. You are going to embarrass us. It's not possible for you to sing this song. And the other one was saying, shut up and take a deep breath, because there's another stanza coming up. And So I'm singing along with this fight going on inside of me, till finally the fighter was saying, "I don't remember when choir practice was, but we sound pretty good." Now, the the so we sing that song. We go the rest of the evening. We spend the night in the place that where we're having the ceremony. The next morning, I'm talking to a young woman. This is her first ayahuasca experience. And she's in the middle of a crisis, an existential crisis. And she's walking from room to room, saying to herself, how the fuck could I sing that song? And I knew she was having some trouble, so I called her over, and she said, I've read books on ayahuasca. I know this kind of thing is possible. She said, I can accept that you sang a song in a language that you don't understand. I cannot accept that I did that. It's not possible to do that. And I said, you've got an issue here. I said, you have to walk out that door, never contact us again, and believe that this was just simply some kind of a drug-induced hallucination and go about living your normal life. Or you have to accept that everything that you've been taught about consciousness is wrong, or at the very best, limited. Your choice. I can tell you, she was sitting right beside me during the ceremony. I said, you sang that song and you sounded really good. The men sang the same notes as the healer sang. The women were singing an octave above and were singing harmonics. We sounded really good, okay? And so I said, you are going to have to redo how you think about us, about what us, whatever me means, whatever us means. That's true for all of us, that we have to do this redo. And even the people who are doing the ayahuasca ceremony were not prepared to do that redo. So we got a lot of work in front of us, and let's get to it. That's my story, and I'm sticking with it.
That's a wonderful story, Shariff. I just want to thank you for sharing the story, the wisdom, the possibility, the path, all of those things. It may be hard for a lot of people to grasp as your final story revealed, but I think that that's the edge that we're all on. So thank you. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And thank all of you for doing this. This is, now I'm going to have to wind myself back down to get back into bed.
Yeah. And you're also now part of the community.
Okay, excellent. Yeah. So to the extent that I can do so, I would like to continue our conversations. As I'm getting close to an actual outline for the Book of Power. I wrote, my first book was called The Power of One, and so my working title on this one is The Power of All. And seeing where that goes, the development of a whole new method of analysis to let go of all of the different analyses we've had of society, the dialectical materialism analysis, and its most recent offshoot being critical race theory. All of this different stuff they taught in school in terms of political science, which isn't political science. It's not even a political art. It's basically the political mess, and seeing how we can not change that system, but make that system obsolete. um, and and how we get to levels of spirituality that transcend religion, that let go of the strictures of religion and allow us to move forward. So yeah, lots of stuff to deal with, and then after I do all that, I'll retire.
Great. So
Yeah.
before you retire, since we have thrown time as we traditionally know it out the window, does anyone have any kind of pressing question for Shariff or comment? Mark, why am I not surprised that you do? Go right ahead. Mhm.
Okay. So Shariff, it's been incredibly good. There's display. Okay, so and you're working. You've created a very compelling display of the map that you're talking about. I'd like to introduce that there's another map that I've been building. It's on technologies and on indigenous people's knowledge. So it goes a lot of the same places you've been. But because somebody needed to do it, I've been focused on technology since I took Bucky's class in 1966 on comprehensive design science. I noted that you were talking about some things that indicated you have some exposure to Bucky too. So, so with the guy I'm working with, who was Bucky's protege, we do have the technologies necessary to turn the corner, to turn the whole world, get rid of fossil fuels by 2030 and a bunch of other things. So what I'd like to do is to sort of work with you and create a display, let's sort of give you a display of a conceptual display of what is possible in that realm. It also includes knowledge bases, which help show the different cultures and, like there's 867 ecoregions in the world, according to the World Wildlife Fund's higher terrestrial ecoregions webpage, and those are consistent patterns of ecosystems. There used to be 10,000 cultures in the world. There were 10,000 ecosystems roughly too. So each culture or ecosystem, yeah. So there's a way of thinking about all that I've been working on for 60 years. So that is something I'd like to display for you so that you can be sitting where you're sitting and saying, this is how all this works, and this is how that fits.
Number one, yes. Number two, I've been very positively impacted by the work of a number of people, and Buckminster Fuller is definitely one of them. The problem, so Buckminster Fuller said, you don't protest the existing system, you basically come up with a better one that makes it obsolete. The problem with that is that in our society, we measure every possible system by money. Does it make me more money?
Yeah. Actually, this does. And all of these technologies do. They're more profitable than what we got right now.
But if I don't perceive that, I can make money the way that I've been making, it's not that it doesn't cost anything. It's that I need to make obscene profits, and not because I need obscene profits, just because this is the way that this is my consciousness. This is the way that I see that the world works. So along with all that you're saying, we have to understand that the way we are thinking about this has to shift and change.
Yeah. There is another way of thinking about it, that there are other people doing that other way of thinking.
Right.
And I'm seeing it, since I'm a tractor for it, I'm seeing it at a lot of places.
Right.
And so a lot of it has to do with get the good stuff to the people at the bottom and do it in a way that works for their cultures.
I'll give you two pieces, and only two pieces, because at the bottom of the hour, I think it's going to be time for. I'm feeling my fading here. Two pieces. I spent time in Cuba, and Cuba is, or at least when I was there, actually probably still is, the most bike-friendly place on the planet. There are more bicyclists in Cuba per capita than anywhere else in the Western Hemisphere. Now, each and every one of those people that's on their bicycle in Cuba is dreaming about a Ford. Okay.
Mhm.
The bicycle culture, the technology is right there. But as soon as the embargo gets lifted, they're all going to ditch the bicycles and go back to Fords and Chevys, because that's where their consciousness is. So they were able to change people's behavior without changing the consciousness, and they'll find that that will turn right around and bite them in the butt in the near future. So part of all of this is literally making ourselves fit to be an integral part of not just this planet, but of the entire universe. And on that note, unless I could.
Let us all thank Shariff, okay, and be respectful of his time and his energy. Thank you for taking us to this place, my friend. Mhm.
No, well, thank you for having me, and I've really enjoyed it. And I would like to get a copy of this recording, because it should be really interesting. And on that note, let me not bring up another topic, but leave. Okay. Talk to you at another point. Okay.
Thank you so
bye.
much,
Thank
Sharif.
you.
Yeah. Bye.